Jujutsu is an overrated anime that is successful because the author kills off the characters. Hey guys, how are you? I hope you're all doing well. I'm the Monio, the interdimensional demon who talks about Jujutsu Kaisen the most on YouTube, and you're on my channel. You who started watching this video, do you think Jujutsu Kaisen is one of the best animes today? I don't think so, mainly because the manga has many flaws in my opinion, but some flaws make it very popular, while at the same time making the story worse. For example, it creates excellent characters, but doesn't take advantage of these characters because they're too busy dying or being discarded, so many of the great qualities that could reach enormous potential are not taken advantage of, and this has a lot to do with the role the author gives the characters in the story, and the way the author deals with the fanbase, but let's take it one step at a time. My first contact with Jujutsu was with the first season of the anime, and to be quite honest, I found it to be quite average. It was just another story that started in a school, with a group of people facing threats and a villain who wasn't very interesting. The story had its good moments, but it wasn't anything above average. When the arc about Gojo's past began, the quality went up a lot, especially in terms of the characters, since Gojo and Geto were much better protagonists than Itadori. Then came the Shibuya incident arc, which is one of the most impactful in the entire series. And it's strange when you think about how interesting Geto's arc to become a villain is, and how his motivations, along with his old relationship with Gojo in the Jujutsu school, would make him a memorable villain. But the character is discarded, and the first contact we have with him in the first season is no longer him, it's Kenjaku using his body. And as much as Kenjaku's plan makes sense, his motivation is not at all interesting compared to what Geto could have been. Overall, Geto as a villain would be a much more interesting character than Kenjaku. Jujutsu's author, Gege Akutami, has already made statements saying that he likes to kill off the most popular characters in his manga, completely contradicting the fans, because if a character is popular, it means that technically the audience wants to see more of him and wants him to continue in the story, and that is usually the logic followed. For example, Vegeta from Dragon Ball was a character created to be killed off, but he became so popular that Akira Toriyama's editors simply wouldn't let him discard Vegeta, which made Toriyama keep him in the story to this day, and that was an excellent decision, since Vegeta is one of the best characters in Dragon Ball, and had the best development arc in my opinion. So we can say that Jujutsu Kaisen is a version of Dragon Ball in which the characters we all like have already died, and people go online creating theories about how these characters could return. And don't get me wrong, killing off characters isn't necessarily a problem. The author of JoJo has been doing this since the 80s. At the end of the first season, the protagonist of JoJo dies, and in the other seasons, several other important characters die. However, in the case of JoJo, these deaths are done in a more specific and conscious way than in Jujutsu. The way Gege Akutami kills off the characters gives me the impression that it's something much more to cause impact than to be thought of for the script, since some of these characters would have been much more useful for the story. And Nobara finally came back, and you might think that this is a good thing, right? The problem is that this is something that the fans were asking for, and it doesn't make sense within the story. Think about it, the amount of time that Nobara was out of the story has already surpassed the time that she was present. She was missing and supposedly dead for longer than she was in the story, so we can say that her appearance is much more of a special participation, like in superhero movies where a character appears for 5 minutes and then leaves and serves only to please the fans. The way the author treats the deaths of characters is also sometimes very ambiguous, since we usually don't see the body, or a burial scene or anything like that. In the case of Nobara specifically, the author had already made several jokes implying that she wouldn't come back, and even added a double page with all the characters that died, and Nobara was among those characters, and a few chapters later she came back, which makes me wonder if this was really planned, or if it was just something he simply decided. And in my opinion, one of the things that will define whether a story will be good or not is how much the author planned that story, so that in the end everything fits together, and there are no plot holes. Of course, this is not an absolute rule, and there are several ways to conduct a narrative, but the impression I have is that Gege Akutami is a little too reactive to the things that the fans ask for, both doing what they want and going against them. But the Monio, so you're saying that listening to the fans' opinions and pleasing them is a bad thing? You said that Akira Toriyama already did this with Vegeta. Depending on the case, listening to the fans can indeed be a problem. With Vegeta, it was just about maintaining a character, but in more complex stories, this can lead to very controversial endings. And a good example of this is the ending of Attack on Titan, in which the author has already said that he read many theories and comments in fan forums, and that this influenced the ending of the manga, and as much as you like the ending, you have to agree with me that it was an ending that displeased a large part of the fans. And in the case of Nobara, it was so unbelievable that she would return, that even the most hopeful fans who create the most absurd theories did not expect her to return, a character who participated in the beginning of the story and who disappeared for 4 years and then returned to the manga, and the question remains, what was Nobara doing during the entire period of the story between the Shibuya incident and the moment when she reappears to face Sukuna? Well, in fact she was in a coma, but you get my point. But the Monyo, the manga isn't over yet. The author can simply give a great explanation for the character's disappearance, one that makes perfect sense. And I tell you that, that's even possible, but I don't believe it will happen, since at the time of recording this video, the author has already said that there are only 5 chapters left for the story to end, and we're still at the end of the fight against Sukuna, so I don't think there will be much space left in the script to explain things like Nobara'S disappearance, since the author will be too busy trying to end the manga by answering questions that are much more relevant to the script. And don't get me wrong, I like Nobara, she's my favorite Jujutsu character, and you tend to be happy with the return of a character you like, especially a Jujutsu character, because I always say that Jujutsu characters don't look like anime characters, they look like people. For example, you'll never meet someone who has the same personality as Luffy from One Piece, and if you do, run away, because that person is probably crazy. But if you do this exercise of imagination with a Jujutsu character, it's perfectly possible to meet someone like Nobara, at work or at school. So yes, I like Nobara coming back, because I like the character. What I don't like is the way the script decided to do it, and if that was necessary for the story, will Nobara have her character arc concluded in such a short time? I find it hard to believe. I'm not a fan of stories that end with the end of the final battle. I always prefer endings where after the battle, there's a breather in the story, where you show what happened to the characters, how they're dealing with the consequences of the ending, things like that. But I wonder if there'll be time to do all of that, if Sukuna hasn't technically been defeated yet, and there are only 5 more chapters left. And we have to take into account that the author has already said that the ending will please the fans, and I wonder to what extent pleasing the fans will make sense with the story, since we know that on the internet there is almost a consensus that the author of Jujutsu doesn't like the fans, and that he likes to contradict them, and in a way that is true. My biggest fear is that at the end of the fight, the author will do something nonsensical, that creates several plot holes in the story just to bring Satoru Gojo back, since that is the main complaint of the fans, and the biggest source of theories on the internet about Jujutsu, of the incredible ways in which Gojo could return to the story. So I really hope that when he says he will please the fans, he doesn't bring Gojo back, since the story is already nonsensical enough with Nobara'S return, and also bringing Gojo back, his death and the whole sequence of him in the afterlife will lose all weight. But what about you? What did you think of Nobara'S return? Do you think Gojo will also return? Leave it in the comments, and if you liked the video, subscribe to follow the next content. Until next time my people, demonic hugs.